Every show has a villain you hate, and then every once in a while a show gives you a villain you cannot look away from. Not because she is evil, not because she is cruel, but because somewhere underneath the coldness and the lollipop and the pregnant belly in a police interrogation room, you sense something that makes her more terrifying than any villain Money Heist had given you before. She was not fighting for a plan. She was not fighting for money. She was not fighting for resistance. She was fighting because she had nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person in any room. Today we go inside the psychology of Alicia. Money Heist built its world around a very clear moral framework. The professor and his crew complicated, flawed, sometimes cruel, but ultimately on the side the audience was supposed to root for. The police, the obstacle, the system, the thing standing between the crew and freedom. And then Season 3 introduced Alicia Sierra, and that entire framework cracked. Because Alicia Sierra was not the incompetent, bureaucratic obstacle the show had used before. She was not Raquel before Raquel fell in love. She was something the professor had never encountered on the other side of the law. Someone who thought exactly like him and had absolutely nothing left to lose. That combination intelligence without restraint is what made Alicia Sierra the most genuinely dangerous character in the entire show. Not the most evil, not the most violent, the most dangerous. And today, we understand exactly why. Here is the detail about Alicia Sierra that changes everything about how you read her. Before the Bank of Spain heist, before the lollipop and the interrogation rooms and the psychological warfare, Alicia Sierra was a different person entirely. She was a genuine and kind person who followed all the rules and behaved properly in her negotiations. She was caring and concerned, even showing genuine worry for her former friend Raquel Murillo about her abusive ex-husband. That person existed. That version of Alicia Sierra was real. And then her husband German died of pancreatic cancer, and something inside Alicia Sierra did not break, it dissolved. The warmth, the rules, the careful ethical lines she had always operated within. All of it gone, not gradually, completely. This is the psychological reality of grief without support. When you lose the person who was the emotional anchor of your entire life, and you have no one else and nothing else to hold on to you, do not grieve in the healthy textbook way. You harden. You redirect everything you feel into the one thing you can still control. For Alicia Sierra, that thing was the job. She poured everything into catching the professor, every ounce of intelligence, every ruthless instinct, every willingness to cross ethical lines she had never crossed before. All of it became fuel for a single obsessive purpose, and the show presented that as villainy. But understand what it actually was. It was a woman in the deepest grief of her life, pregnant, and alone, choosing the only available version of forward momentum. Not healing, not processing, hunting. Because hunting felt better than feeling. Now we understand what made Alicia Sierra so uniquely terrifying. The professor worked within a framework of things he cared about. The plan, the crew, Raquel, his brother, his father's legacy. He was brilliant, but his brilliance was always constrained by what he stood to lose. Alicia had none of those constraints. Her husband was dead. Her career, built over years of dedicated service, would eventually be taken from her by the same government she had served loyally. Her reputation would be publicly destroyed by a superior who used her as a scapegoat to protect himself. She would end up pregnant, alone, fired, and hunted, and she kept going. That is not simply determination. That is the psychology of someone who has processed, consciously or not, that the worst has already happened. German was gone. The life she had built around him was gone, which meant there was nothing left for the consequences of her actions to threaten. Most people operate within invisible boundaries, set by what they are afraid to lose: their job, their reputation, their freedom, their relationships. Alicia Sierra had already lost the thing that made all of those other things matter, which meant she would do things nobody else in her position would do. She tortured Rio. She used Nairobi's son as leverage. She pushed every ethical and legal boundary available to her, not out of cruelty, for its own sake, but because the grief had burned away the part of her that understood why those boundaries existed. A person without fear of consequences is not stronger than everyone else. Now we get to the turning point that reframes Alicia Sierra's entire story. She was fired after everything she had done in service of catching the professor. The sleepless nights, the psychological warfare, the ethical lines crossed in the name of the investigation. Her own superior, Luis Tamayo, framed her, told the press she was a mole, that she had been working with the professor from inside the investigation, that every failure of the operation was her fault. Think about what that moment meant psychologically. Alicia Sierra had given everything to the institution, had crossed lines she should never have crossed in the name of the institution, had compromised herself in the name of the institution, had become a harder, colder, more ruthless version of herself in the name of the institution, and the institution threw her under the bus the moment keeping her became inconvenient. This is the moment where Alicia Sierra's psychology completes its transformation. Because before the firing, however ruthless she had become, she was still operating within a framework, still serving something outside herself, still pointing her intelligence and her grief in a direction that had institutional backing. After the firing, she had nothing, no badge, no authority, no system, no backing, pregnant, alone, publicly disgraced. Here is the psychological parallel the show built so carefully and the audience mostly missed. Alicia Sierra and the professor were the same person on opposite sides. Both operated from grief. The professor built the entire heist around his father's death, a childhood trauma that never healed and redirected itself into 20 years of planning. Alicia built her pursuit around her husband's death, an adult trauma that stripped away every restraint she had. Both had extraordinary intelligence that they used to read and manipulate people around them. The professor manufactured situations, Alicia dismantled them. Both played psychological chess, while everyone around them played checkers. Both were completely willing to use other people's vulnerabilities as tactical weapons. The professor used Raquel's loneliness. Alicia used Nairobi's love for her son. Neither of them lost sleep over it. And both, underneath all the strategy and the control and the performance of total self-sufficiency, were people who had been fundamentally broken by loss and had rebuilt themselves entirely around a purpose rather than face the grief directly. The professor had his heist. Alicia had her hunt. And when Alicia finally found the professor, when she tracked him down and had a gun to his head, something interesting happened. She did not pull the trigger, because somewhere in facing the one person who was genuinely her equal, the hunt ended, and without the hunt, Alicia Sierra had to figure out what she actually was. Alicia Sierra became a fugitive, fired, disgraced, hunted by the same government she had served. She had no choice but to align herself with the professor. And something unexpected happened. She mellowed. Not immediately, not completely, but the birth of her daughter Victoria alone in a stormwater tank, helped by the professor and his people, cracked something open in Alicia Sierra that the grief had sealed shut. The birth of Victoria made Alicia become more empathetic, and that transformation is the most psychologically significant thing in her entire arc. Because Alicia Sierra did not become softer because she learned a lesson. She did not have a redemption arc in the traditional sense where a character realizes they were wrong and changes their behavior accordingly. She became softer because she had something to lose again. Victoria gave her that. A reason to be careful, a reason to think about consequences, a reason to operate within limits. Again, not because the limits were right, but because now there was someone who needed her to survive. That is not morality. That is not growth in the clean inspirational sense. That is the psychology of a woman who had been operating without an anchor for years and finally found one again. And what it tells you about the original Alicia Sierra, the cold, ruthless, lollipop-wielding inspector who tortured Rio and used Nairobi's son, is this: she was never fundamentally cruel. She was fundamentally unanchored. German was her anchor. When he died, she drifted into places no anchored person would go. Victoria brought her back. The cruelty was never who Alicia Sierra was. It was what grief looks like when it has nowhere to go. Alicia Sierra is the most psychologically complex character Money Heist ever gave us. Not because she was evil, Not because she was good, but because she was the clearest portrait of what happens to a person when loss removes every boundary they ever had, and what happens when they finally find a reason to put those boundaries back. She was ruthless because she was grieving. She was dangerous because she had nothing left to protect. And she was underneath all of it the only person in the entire show who genuinely matched the professor. Not in a red jumpsuit, on the other side of the law, with a lollipop and a gun pointed at his head. If this changed how you see Alicia Sierra, or if you think she was simply a villain who got a soft ending she did not deserve, drop it in the comments. Next video we go inside the relationship nobody in Money Heist ever talks about, the one that did not survive the heist, Denver and Moscow. Next video. See you there.